My name's Benjamin Woodruff. I'm the president of the Global Foundation for the Performing Arts. I'm Australian, but now live in Geneva. And I have a long history of working in the field of classical music competitions. I've worked with many of you over the years in various capacities, and now I'm honored to work with you as representatives of elements of the performing arts sector who have different experiences and who have different predictions about our sector, about the performing arts, about culture, and about how we reopen after the incredible experience that has been COVID-19. This is the second conference we have presented in partnership with UNITAR, which is the United Nations Institute for Training and Research based in New York. Our first conference last year was dedicated to music education, and we partnered with the Global Music Education League with many directors of conservatoires. This is our first conference this year in our series for Building Back Better and how the cultural sector will reappraise itself and reposition itself in society once we're allowed to return to a more interactive community. I'd like to thank UNITAR, particularly Ambassador Swazo, for supporting our mission to raise the needs and predictions of the cultural sector to international policymakers and governments and missions, and to take directly the words from artists and cultural leaders to government leaders. The Global Foundation for the Performing Arts is an organization I founded late in 2019, committed to helping young artists find career paths and international opportunities, and to act as an advocacy organization for the performing arts. I would like to acknowledge that today is also World Piano Day, and it seems fitting that today is the 88th day of the year and therefore is celebrated around the world as World Piano Day. I think it seems a great start to our conference. Today's format will be very much a discussion. Each of our panelists has different expertise and different location expertise, and we'll be pushing very much an open discussion where we encourage debate and thoughts and input from our room audience. I would like to now pass the microphone to our co-host and partner and the head of UNITAR in New York, Ambassador Marco Swazo. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. You have been very kind with your words to me and to the institutions. And we are very proud actually of this partnership with the Global Foundation on Performing Art. How do you know the United Nations is a kind of world policy making institutions composed by government, civil society, private sector. After September 2015, when the Sustainable Development Goals agenda was adopted, there is no single activity in the daily life of a human being that is not touched by this agenda. And governments are driven to implement those agendas. So the delegates, the diplomats, the ambassadors, the minister or presidents to come to New York every year had a kind of interruption with COVID-19 pandemic. It was the first time in the history of the United Nations that they were not were able to come to New York and to meet and to make policy directly. They did it more or less in the way we are meeting today, but with a more, how I can say this, Hollywood format, because they were pre-recorded messages. So the delegates that were in the General Assembly Hall were introduced by the President General Assembly and by the permanent representative, and they saw a video, pre-recorded video. It was not even as interactive as we are talking today. So that was the impact of the pandemic. Not even September 11 interrupted the work of the General Assembly as COVID-19 did. And just to make a little note on that. But let's focus now on ourselves, the Global Foundation for Performing Arts, UNITAR. As you rightly mentioned, Benjamin, we started working together in 2020, and we delivered a very important briefing, a very important conference. And this is the second event, which is two events per se, two sessions, one today and one tomorrow. Tomorrow we will have the voice of the permanent representative of Guatemala, who will deliver some keynote address to the participants. So UNITAR and the Global Foundation of Performing Arts has agreed on this mutually beneficial partnership. As I said, we consider that art is intrinsically linked to the sustainable development, not only in music, not only in theater, in all forms of performing arts. And so we saw much of the value of the foundation, and we appreciate really the trust that the foundation has put on UNITAR and the United Nations to deliver this message. These two sessions will compress the conversation and discussion about Sustainable Development Goal 4, gender equality, Sustainable Development 5, economic growth, unemployment, SDG or Sustainable Development 8, sustainable communities, peace, justice, and strong institutions. It's of paramount importance because the United Nations just to cope with COVID-19 has declared 2021 International Year of Creativity, Economy for Sustainable Development. We know that the arts and performing arts are economic driver also of the societies. Not only enhance the spirit and creativity of the human beings, also produce work, produce education, and promote the intercultural exchanges and intercultural understanding among civilizations. So this is the added value of this partnership with the Global Foundation and UNITAR, and we hope that we will manage to cope with the needs and to the work of the Global Foundation is doing. The other topic that we are going to see today is that the United Nations embrace the philosophy of no one left behind. What else we can do that validating the voices of culture? This is one of the most crucial, important messages that we do. The Global Foundation actually put all of you, remarkable panelists, remarkable men and women of culture, of music and performing arts to talk to us about the impact of the pandemic on your communities, to your students, to your own institutions, and to share with us the experience that you have. As the director of the Global Foundation said, let's see what we learn from this crisis and how we can improve for the future to be prepared for, God forbid, another crisis situation, because the scientists are saying that this is not the first one, it won't be the last one also. So we mentally have to prepare. So today's event is a continuation of these friendly relations between the UNITAR and the Global Foundation. And I have to pay homage to one lady that actually put us together to work, and is Lucia Wow. I have to say that before these two events that we organized in 2020 and 2021 now, and this strong relation that we have, we did some events with other organizations that Lucia was chairing. I hope this organization is still on, because it was of great importance, and we did one event with her. So thank you very much, Lucia, for putting us together and to make us work. I don't want to take most of your time, but I wanted to say it as a training and educational institution, UNITAR mission is to enhance the decision-making capacities for key players in societies. We believe that this partnership with the Global Foundation of Performing Arts will enrich knowledge in the fields that are critical to the minds and heart of people. This is just the beginning. We believe that the future we are building will be better. We will continue our efforts encouraging diversity, increasing institutional and individual capacities, and continuously providing assistance for those who are truly in need. So I think there is no better message to say that when the Global Foundation and UNITAR join effort together, we do better, and we can do much better for the future. So thank you very much. I encourage and I hope you have a wonderful discussion. I will be following through, and tomorrow maybe I'll have the privilege to introduce the permanent representative of Guatemala. Thank you very much, and you can count with all our support on a personal basis or institutional basis. Benjamin, I go back to you. I don't want to steal much of the precious time of our distinguished panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marcos, was it? Thank you. Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for the partnership. COVID-19 has affected all of us, and it has affected the cultural sector profoundly. The cultural sector for many years was based on live performance and still is based on live performance. But with the world shutting live performance, what has been happening and what will happen as we reopen and return? I was reading some very interesting statistics that through the COVID period, 81% of surveyed audience members or survey respondents were accessing music and virtual performances to assist them during the period of COVID-19. Spotify's recent statistic that it has been uploading 40,000 tracks every day to its library shows that streaming as a result of COVID-19 has become an enormously expanding area of the performing arts. But our artists have not been safe or remunerated to the same degree during the period of COVID-19. Music and the performing arts are desperately needed, but our sector is in trouble and needs to come back to survive. The cultural sector provides 3% of the world's GDP. It's a vibrant, passionate driver of community and society. And how can we ensure that it survives fairly, respectfully, and remunerated properly? I would like to briefly introduce our 5 panelists and then pass to each one to just say some opening remarks before we open the floor to discussions. I'm going to work left to right on my screen, not in any particular order. And the first person that I see is Lydia Connolly. Lydia Connolly is the director, or is a board director and head of artist management at Harrison Parrott, based in London. And so Lydia brings her experience of the artist management sector to this discussion. We're joined by Karendra De Vroep from Pretoria in South Africa. Karendra is the artistic director of music competitions at the UNITAR Music Foundation in Pretoria. And I'm honored to have sat on a board with Karendra, or worked on boards with him in my previous music competition days. Next, I see Ruta Prusevicieni.
Hello.
I hope. Hello.
Yes.
Thank you. General Director of the National Philharmonic Society of Lithuania. And Ruta is also a board member of the European Festivals Association. And Ruta is joining us from Vilnius in Lithuania. We have Andrea Kellen, president of the New England Conservatory in Boston, recently, well, 2 years, 18 months into the position. And I thank you, Andrea, for joining us this morning. And our final panelist this morning in today's session is Hannah Ari Gaifman, Director Emerita of the Tisch Center for the Arts at 92Y, and she's joining us in New York. So firstly, welcome to all of you, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. I'm going to jump back now in the same order and invite Lydia to say a few words first. But before then, I'll just say, give you some more background about Lydia. Lydia is the board director and head of artist management with Harrison Parrott. She was the first woman to read music as an undergraduate at New College, Oxford, and is a licentiate of the Royal Academy of Music. She is also an alumna of the Strategic Leadership Program at Said Business School, Oxford. Lydia is a board member of the International Artist Managers Association and a trustee of the Harrison Parrott Foundation. She speaks regularly at industry conferences and seminars, including IAMA, ABO, Women in Music, South Bank Centre, Institut Français, Classical Next, and is invited to work with students and young music industry professionals, including within the ABO's Find Your Way program and for Triborough Music Hub. Lydia has additionally been a panelist for the Global Leaders program and for La Maestra, Taki Alsop Speakers Forum. Lydia, thank you for joining us. As you bring a range of experiences and thoughts. What are your thoughts on the cultural sector? What are your suite of artists doing right now, waiting for concert halls to reopen? What's happening in your day-to-day world?
Well, thank you very much for including me. And it's a pleasure to see everybody, including some old friends and some, I hope, new friends. Hannah, I was just thinking, I think my trip to New York when I saw you in January 19 was one of my last trips before lockdown. So it's good to see you.
You too.
Where to begin? Our artists are actually working pretty hard right now. I think one of the many ironies of this time, and we were talking just before we began the session, is that while concert halls are largely silent to the outside world, behind the scenes, those of us, behind the concert platform are working harder than ever, working like crazy. And our roster of artists are jumping around and performing all over the world at the moment. They're just none of them in the place they expected to be, probably not playing what they're expecting to perform. And they're certainly not being paid anything like what they were expecting to be paid. And our job as managers in that part of our work is, I've described it as a cross between Jenga and whack-a-mole. I mean, we really are just looking for opportunities, seeing who can manage the quarantine, who's in the right country, who can get a test in time, substituting programs, smaller ensemble programs when you can't get too many musicians on stage. And of course, one of the huge changes which has come and which will no doubt continue has been the acceleration of digital, because most of these artists are just performing for the cameras and the microphones for streaming. There are some small audiences, some reduced audiences. I'll give a shout out to Spain as being one of the few countries where they have not stopped and people are still performing for an audience in the hall, even if the numbers are restricted. But the expansion and broadening of the digital offering and the creativity within digital content production, not to mention the incredibly tricky business of negotiating media rights. These are all areas which have taken on a huge significance. But I would say that the creativity and the energy, I'm so proud of us in our sector for the amount of positivity and driving that's been going on. Nobody's sort of buried themselves under a duvet and wait for it to be over. We are really working our way through this and taking the opportunity, I think, to embrace issues which were already with us before the pandemic, but which have been brought into very sharp relief. And of course, those include diversity and inclusion right at the top of the agenda, because the arts are for everyone. And they are such an expression of our humanity and such a contributor to economies and to society. And we have to face up to the fact of how many people have been left behind systematically and persistently. And now we have a better opportunity than ever before to do something about that.
Thank you. I completely agree, Lydia. I was taking notes. I apologize for the pause there. Harrison Parrott has artists, as you say, all around the world. You have quite a strong presence in China, and other parts of Asia, of course. You were saying, as we were catching up earlier, you raised the actual point that at the moment, with quarantine rules changing and adapted in every country, or slightly different adaptation and adoption in different countries, you were saying you have artists who are giving one engagement, but doing a 3-week quarantine to achieve that one engagement.
It's not 3 weeks everywhere, but
true.
Hong Kong and China at the moment. But in most countries, there is a rigorous combination of quarantine and testing before an artist is allowed to go and begin rehearsals.
My question is your artist prepared or willing to do that because they need to perform so much, or is it still financially viable for them to do or undertake such an exercise?
Well, there is an absolute necessity for these artists to perform. This is part of who they are. This is existential for them. As we know, right at the beginning, where it really was impossible to go anywhere, the flood of performance that came out on social media channels, artists playing for a virtual audience because that was the only way they could play at all, was unstoppable. Of course, that very swiftly raised some very challenging questions about the value of what they were doing and how their financial remuneration for that would develop as this went forward. Artists are also asking themselves more than ever, I think, what value can they bring? And this is another whole part of the conversation. It's a very important topic. What an artist's role and responsibility is in society, and getting out there and performing and engaging with a community, whether it's a home community or a community somewhere else in the world. Again, they can't sit under a duvet and wait for it all to be over either. And so those quarantines are sometimes, they are an essential hurdle to be overcome. And we have, for example, conductors who are music directors of orchestras far away from where they are resident. And they have now done multiple 2-week quarantines in order to go and be with their orchestra, with their players, showing their commitment. I'm coming to you. I'm going to spend that 2 weeks in a hotel room because I want to be with you. I want to support you. And we have to make music together. There are some incredible demonstrations of human spirit and force of will going on.
I completely concur. I'd like to just draw out one point that you made earlier, and it was about the substitution or the flexibility of your artists, not just the artists, but it's also the concert halls, the presenters, the programmers. I come from a sort of chamber music passion personally, so I appreciate flexibility and ensemble work and interchange. And it's something I've always felt that perhaps our sector could take this moment to rethink how far in advance our programs are booked and how set in stone sometimes the performing arts can feel. How have your artists responded to sudden change?
They are, all of them, incredibly flexible and adaptable, and some have maybe changed in their own outlook on this. I think what you say about the way the industry is changing its own approach to the rhythms of booking and planning is absolutely right. That had to happen at the start of the pandemic or through the pandemic for obvious reasons, but I think that's with us to stay as well. We were in an uncertain world before this began. We're in an even more uncertain world now, and it becomes even more surreal to think that any artist can tell you exactly what they're going to play in 24 months from now, and why is that going to make sense at that time, either for the artist or for the performing institution. And that rhythm, yes, that rhythm, those traditional booking cycles in the classical business, which have always been with so much lead time, I'm sure those are now, they're already disrupted. I think that disruption is going to remain. And of course, there are economic consequences there. We were already seeing moves away from subscription buying and more single ticket buying. We now have digital ticket buying. I'm sure we're going to have a blend of live and digital performance. There will be people who have discovered that sometimes they'd actually like to stay in and watch a performance rather than go to the hall. Artists have to be thinking creatively about that, and presenters as well. It's already happening, and there are some extraordinary things going on all over the world.
Thank you, Lydia. I'm going to move slightly now and invite Andrea Kalin to speak, because Andrea, I'm aware you have time pressure, so I want to maximize your opportunity with us this morning. Andrea Kalin was born in England and grew up in London, Ontario. She trained as a pianist and musicologist. In January 2019, Andrea Kalin became the president of the New England Conservatory in Boston, chosen after what the New England Conservatory called in a statement an intensive 3-year search. Prior to this, Andrea was the Dean of Oberlin College from 2014 to 2018, and before that served for 9 years as the Conservatory's Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. I'm going to pause there, Andrea, and invite you to comment or to bring your thoughts to the reflections that you've considered in the education sphere, and perhaps the adapted skills that would be necessary for a new type of performing career in the cultural sector to come as we build back better.
Yes, thank you. And it's really lovely to be here today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the value and the evolution of the arts in a dynamic world, ever so. You know, I think my comments really are complementary to Lydia's. And what's one of the things that's really struck me throughout this past year is that perhaps for the first time ever, the profession and educating for the profession are at the same point. We're all at the same starting line. You know, we're as educators always in the futures game. We're training our students for a world that does not yet exist, and yet we have to train them to get the jobs that do exist in this moment. But right now we're all reimagining together, and so it's been, I think it's a fascinating moment and a particularly powerful moment for us all. You know, of all the things we've learned over the past year, humility, resilience, stamina, I think a little bit of hope as well. One of the things that has struck me the most is the reaffirmation of the value and the relevance and the impact of art in the world. And I don't say that in a quippy manner. You know, the first weekend we sent our students home, the unthinkable, on or about March 13th, 2020, the world changed for us, right? And we sent our students home. And I went home and I thought, well, perhaps this is it. Maybe all these comments I've been saying, maybe it isn't as important as I thought it was. And then it was, you know, hours later that images and sounds from Italy started coming over our screens. And we all realized that the arts, it's fundamentally humanistic work, right? And the human spirit is not to be repressed. And so we've seen all of the things that are that define our humanity become ever more important. You know, connectivity, creativity, beauty, all of these kinds of things, expression. And as Lydia said, I think everything that was important, everything that we've realized is ever more pressing now was evident before 2020. We knew certainly in the education space that we had to be training our students and thinking about their education in a different way. But 2020 has really accelerated the urgency of that. And I would say it's amplified the opportunity of that as well. So as we've been thinking about it, you know, the mission remains very strong. We're trying to nurture the highest artistic standards and artistic sensibility and creative growth in our students. And because we believe that music and arts are transcendent expressions of humanity and they have an important place in the world. So that mission is there, but we as educators are having to reimagine how we execute that. So that it has transformational impact, you know, on our students, on the professions, we can contribute to that, and then on society as a whole. And so I would say that there are probably 3 areas that we're really having to think about as we attempt to build back better. The first is really how we educate our students. We have traditionally a sort of checklist of skills, and they live in sort of little silos and columns, and we have this lovely checklist that we march through, and our students are meant to learn, and then poof, they're educated musicians and off they go and have these fabulous careers. That checklist has gotten a lot longer, even in the last year. Certainly online is a stage. It's a different stage than the one I'm virtually standing in front of. And our students need to think about how they perform on that stage differently. So the checklist of skills has gotten longer, and if it was ever possible to teach it in the checklist manner, it's not now. And so we really need to be thinking in integrated ways. We need to be helping our students form connections. We need to be really activating the thing that we do as musicians on a daily basis, which is practice. We need to be giving them the opportunities to practice, imagine and practice their professional lives, and really thinking about how we help them synthesize their technical work, their sort of philosophical and social work as well into everything that they're doing. So greater connection, much more integrated approach is absolutely what we're working on. The second, I think, is why we educate our students. We really need to be thinking and encouraging them to think, and thinking as an institution much more about the social and cultural relevance of our work. In short, we need to be listening more, right? That is a fundamental skill, and we need to be activating it ourselves. And if we think about the artistic triangle of composer, performer, audience, as conservatories, we tend to privilege the performer, a little bit the composer, and we sort of take the audience more for granted. We need to flip that, right? So that the audience is at the top. And really think about how we create a culture of belonging for our audiences, how we prepare our students to listen and think about their audiences as well. That means making space for missing voices. And it also really needs, it means really activating and cultivating a culture of belonging so that people feel that they are part of this. These beautiful halls can also be alienating, and we need to really be thinking about how we change that so that our work really does have the resonance that we know it can have. And then the final piece is really an extension of that. We're thinking a lot about how we extend the reach of our work. Technology obviously is a huge opportunity here. I would say as a conservatory, our audience are exponentially bigger, have been exponentially bigger over the last year. It was shocking to me that the week right before we sent our students home, we had to close down to external audiences, and suddenly we had 20,000 people online watching. Which, you know, and we were not prepared for that. We were not doing it well. So we've learned a lot about that. But also, we need to bring music to children. One of my colleagues, the Dean of the School of Music at Yale, Robert Blocker, years ago said that we have an obligation to realize music as the birthright of all children, which I love. And I think as conservatories, it's our responsibility also to not just build the next generation of conservatory students and great musicians in the world, but also to build the next generation of audiences and music lovers, right? It's that sort of Kenner and Liebhaber thing. So because musical engagement and musical work is for everybody, as Lydia said, and it really builds creativity and communication and fosters connection and collaboration and resilience of community, and all of those things that we have learned are absolutely fundamental to our existence over the last year.
Thank you so much. I just resonate with everything you've been saying, and particularly, I'm particularly grateful that you mentioned putting audience front and center as well, and putting the, I don't want to say end user, but I mean that's the term, the end user. And I think for a long time our sector sort of forgot the end user, or took them for granted, or perhaps just assumed that they would always be there, and in the way that we find it easiest for them to be there. And I think now you touched on technology and innovation, and somebody was saying to me the other day, in 6 months last year, we rushed 6 years ahead of technology innovation in the music sector with digital streaming and so forth. And I think you're right. I think our end users today and in the future are going to be filtering in and accessing the performing arts in very many different ways, all at the same time, and all with value. And how we can remember to join them wherever they are, as well as inviting them in for the live experience, which will become even more important when they choose to undertake that. Have you had to consider adding different course elements for the new world?
Absolutely, we absolutely have. So one of the biggest challenges for us, of course, was real-time collaboration. Right at the very beginning, we couldn't do that. The technology wasn't there, and it wasn't even particularly the technology; it was the internet. Right? It just, the connections over time and space. We're in a very different space on that front now than we were just 12 months ago. And so we have a faculty member who's done a lot of work working with a platform called Soundjack that's enabled us to do real-time collaboration and create these little fast music boxes that enable people to connect across continents. It's been quite remarkable, really, and actually collaborate together in real time, even though they're not in the same space. That has led to just a whole lot of education about sound and how sound travels and how we think about that, how we use technology, how we might use it for a tool, how we can use it to address some of the social challenges as well, sort of access challenges. It's really forced us to think about access to our work, both the teaching part of it and the performance part of it in different ways. And again, performing for a stage online, it's just different. The rep is different. The times parts are different. The way in which you flow through these things is different. The way in which you can build in other elements, the multimedia component of it is different. And so it's forcing us to kind of really think about the audience. We can't see them. We can't assume anything about them. We have to think about them in different ways. But as I say, building all of those skills, we don't have time for more and more and more classes. So what we're doing is building in technology skills to how we teach theory, teaching theory from a creative pursuit as well as an analytical pursuit. If you flip that model, then suddenly the style becomes less important. Your genre and style becomes less important when you're thinking about impact and effect and affect. So we're building it into things like that. We're building it into, we're building these technological components into all of the work that we do. And that's just going to have to continue. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity. I think the challenge right now, candidly, is for us and for our students to get out of this mindset of digital equals emergency and move into, we now have a whole lot of choices. What are we trying to achieve with any given class, with any given performance, with any given rehearsal, and how can we use all the tools that we have at our disposal to have the most powerful impact in that way?
Thank you. I completely agree. I think what we've done is added another platform. We've added another channel to our performance outlet. Andrew, if I can, there's a question from somebody in the Zoom room. Could you please repeat the name of the platform, please?
Yeah, it's called Soundjack.
Thank you. Wonderful. And how have what has the student response been with these changes to course structure and rethinking? Are they the ones demanding the change in style or skill, or is it a combination of?
It's definitely a combination, and it's definitely been a journey. The journey continues. You know, we sent the first 8 weeks was just extreme, everybody in a distant place and everybody reeling, and it was exhausting. You know, the summer was not a summer in the traditional sense. Our students weren't at their festivals, our faculty weren't at their festivals, and there was a lot of sort of putting things back together. There was a lot of connection over the summer and a lot of growth and learning. We learned our students were experimenting in different ways. Our faculty were experimenting in different ways. I knew we had reached a whole new level when I was copied on an email thread where all of the string faculty were talking about the different settings on Zoom and how they were going to get the best sound. And I thought, okay, this is just not what I ever expected to see from these folks. But we came back in the fall. The students are forcing us to think. I think the students are forcing us to think about the why of what we do, right? How the missing voices, how we engage with audiences. There's been a lot of, they have been very inclined, and so there's been a lot of work actually of community engagement. Our students have virtually, digitally been in hospitals in Boston. They've been engaging with doctors. They've been, you know, music and healing spaces has been incredibly empowered. They're learning to teach digitally. And so they've had a really important role in some of the Boston public schools and just general community engagement. So they've pushed us on this front. They've really pushed this notion of belonging. They're also pushing us, and this has financial impact as well, to make sure that now we can do the technology at the same level that we do acoustic, right? Or our regular performance spaces. So we're having to look at all of our not our sound systems, but our streaming platforms and camera angles and all of this sort of thing, because they want to do really dynamic creative work, the same that has the same kind of impact in a digital space that they can have in an in-person space. So yeah, it's a combination, I would say, of faculty and students, but the thread of it all is just really listening and really reimagining and flipping, I think, this notion of all the reasons we can't do something or all the reasons that we have traditionally done X, Y, and Z, and to thinking about, what does it take to do this in a different way, and what kind of impact can that have?
Thank you. I'm sure that the outreach and just the different levels of access and different ways out will help expand awareness back in. So thank you very much for contributing so holistically. I'm going to ask Hannah to join the floor now. Hannah Ari-Gaffman is Director Emerita of 92nd Street Y's Tisch Centre for the Arts. In addition to her literary initiatives, which include staged readings and dramatic adaptations of works by novelists, poets, playwrights, and biographers, she curates a number of noteworthy concert series featuring a wide range of exciting and unusual chamber music performances. Before joining 92nd Street Y, Hannah was Dean of the Mozart Academy in Prague, Director of Artistic Management and International Relations of the Czech Philharmonic, the Director of Prague's annual Musica Judaica Festival. She's a pianist with PhD in Comparative Literature, and I'm delighted that you're with us this morning. Hannah, I pass the floor to you to give your thoughts and predictions for life after COVID and life after 92Y as well.
Well, it's not going to be after 92Y. It's going to be under the auspices of 92Y. I have been with the Y for 21 years. I mean, I've reached my maturity, I would say. I can drink at the Y now in New York. And it's wonderful. Thank you. We have heard from Lydia, who is one of my favorite artist managers. We have heard from Andrea, running one of my favorite educational institutions. And here I am, the presenter, who then has to give work to the artists who come from these places. And as Lydia mentioned, the last time we saw each other in person was actually a beginning of what I believe is one part of the most dramatic changes in our profession. The most interdisciplinary work you can see actually on stage and happening straight in front of your eyes. It was a combination of music performed on stage, dance performed on stage, reading and art installation of the highest level. I have to say, every single person on the team had to change their perceptions. It's the work called Love in Fragments, based on Colombard. The violinist and the cellist were playing, lying on the floor, dancing, sitting, and the quality of the playing was amazing. It was just getting rid of certain habits. And a year later, COVID comes, and guess what? We had to get rid of all our habits and I would say safety and security nets. And as a presenter, and I have to say we were very lucky because the Y, I think, survived its 145 years of existence thanks to its flexibility. We turned around, and the night, which was originally planned as chamber music concert, then as a recital, within less than 24 hours turned into a digital concert. And that was it. We had to start. And then we had one more digital concert from the hall. And then we started working with the artists from their home because they couldn't move and we couldn't move. And the technology kept developing with us and the techniques kept developing with us. And now, a year later, if we look back, it is all about open mind, all the tools we have and questioning them all the time. And I was thrilled to hear from Andrea that we ask ourselves all the time, what are the useful tools? What is it that we can enable? How can, and work with the educators, with the artist managers. It's no more the manager represents the artist and the presenter abuses the artist, but not paying enough and not presenting the way they would like it. No, we're in it together. And that actually this type of a work started with the artists and with the performance that Lydia was present at. We were all in it together. Either it works together or it's not going to work. And the together is very different. And it is about listening because it is together on stage, but it is also together creating the conditions that enable the presenters to offer something meaningful, the artists to be really have a meaningful expression and be able to live. And just not on the side, be active participants in the education and discovery of talent in the younger age. Even during COVID, our Center for Arts, Learning and Leadership has been working with the schools online. Our artists were actively engaged in conversations with the students about performance, taking part on a performance online, following as much as actively, and engagement, I think, is one of our keywords. How do we engage through the two walls? I'm speaking to you and somebody else is watching another wall of a screen. And if we are lucky, we get through to each other. If we are not so lucky, it stays somewhere behind the screen. And the work is daily and very intensive and seriously questioning everything we want to do. And the idea for me, becoming emerita, was to start something completely new, if you wish, from scratch. A summer festival that would be hybrid, that would be communicative, not limited to, you don't necessarily have to go on a plane. Imagine you have just cut the impact of polluting the earth by yet another plane, which is another question, and be available to everyone in Europe, here in Australia. And that was actually the very first night, Garrick Olsen playing his recital, and we get on chat. We just heard him live in Adelaide, I think. And here he is, and I'm so happy I can hear him again, this whole recital. This is a new opportunity. And how we combine the life, which we need. I want to be in the hall with you and listen, physically listen and communicate, physically feel the vibration, which is very different from the screen. But we have both. And that's a great gift. Maybe we won't be making the same money. We won't be making, none of us. We are all poorer, except for a few billionaires who maybe will support us all. But at the same time, it's doable. I think we can manage. I hope so. That's my plan. And it's, I think, everyone's plans in our presenting world. It's not going to be anywhere near to what it was on March 12th.
Thank you, Hannah. I completely agree. I think we've all had the opportunity to rethink why we do what we do, and also what would we travel again for?
Mm-hmm.
You know, why would we fly across the globe again? You know, I think everyone has a greater level of assessment, and you touch on a topic that I'm very interested in, which is in new formats, new presentation formats as a result of COVID. Now we have these two platforms. Your concept of a festival that's a hybrid, I think, is the way forward for our sector. I think there'll be performances, of course, because humans need to express, and musicians and artists need to express themselves. And we've had a year of suppressed expression, and suppressed reception from audiences too. But I think this, as the doors open up, I think we'll have multiple ways of presenting expression. We have more tools at our fingertips now. Perhaps the only billionaires in the future in our sector will be the technology providers that are allowing us to connect with each other.
I want to just go back to one more point, and this is the young audience. We have been speaking about thinking about audience, but my aim, my personal goal is to have, even if we have limited number of audiences in the hall, to have young people from schools call it a school trip with the dinner as we had it before COVID, so that they can meet the artists in person, maybe 6 feet apart, but still in person, and ask questions directly, have the body language present, the vibration of the hall. It will be a different vibration than we had before, but there will be the life experience and the engagement. And maybe among the 20 students who can be in the hall, there will be a talent that it really can study and understand what does it give it to her or to him being part of this in whatever way it is. And I think this is probably the most important part of it, because these kids were robbed of a year of presence together. And that's another really meaningful thing.
A quick question while you talk about that. As a presenter, are you looking for different aspects of the artists you select for future work?
I think I had, and I have to admit to that, to me, it was always about certain artistic integrity and curiosity and daring to move forward. integrating, you know, when I spoke with Anthony McGill about his program, I said, I want the Shepherd on the Rock, but I want a new work. And we commissioned jointly a work from a friend of his and the combination will be different. I'm looking for artists who are willing to take a risk, who understand that when you commission a work, you commit to it long term, that it's not one-off, one evening for, you know, fulfilling an obligation, and that the composer understands that there is a commitment to the audience, that there has to be, that the power of communication and engagement has to be there. And I have been very lucky in my very, very long presenting career. I have worked with amazing artists, and actually we started talking with the audience. The Y is the one place where for years you would finish a concert and the artists went out and it was open. You went to the lobby, not to a green room where there was one person. People met. The authors went out to sign books, but they spoke and listened to their audience. The curiosity was there. This is something which is so not being selective. You're a 5-year-old kid who your parents brought to a concert or were encouraged by your music teacher, you get the same attention as anybody else, if not more. That matters.
Thank you. We'll come back to some of these points. Thank you very, very much. I'd like to invite Ruta to speak and to join us and to share her thoughts. Ruta is the General Director of the National Philharmonic Society of Lithuania. She's also a director of the Vilnius Festival, and she's a board member of the European Festivals Association, which is based in Brussels. She's a former jury member of the Europe for Festivals for Europe Award. And she's also an associate member of an organization I'm very interested in, which is the European Concert Halls Organization, and chairwoman of the Association of Lithuanian Arts and Cultural Institutions. So Ruta, you're bringing many presenting experiences to the table. You're sitting in front of a digital streaming situation. Please join our discussion.
Hello, dear colleagues. I'm very pleased to speak from Vilnius, Lithuania, from this with this image behind me from Digital Concert Hall. Without this digital tool, we wouldn't be able to pay back to our audiences, to our very loyal audiences that have been are still waiting for the live performances. And this had to be 80th anniversary of the largest concert organization in the Baltic states, the National Philharmonic Society in Lithuania. And I needed badly sabbatical, but not like this. As Lydia, Andrea, and Hannah said, we had 5 times more workload this year. And I have to tell you about a really phenomenal situation in Lithuania, which means what can the artistic vision and courage do. We were really very much panicking in March last year, because there was only bad news coming from all the international media and from our colleagues that everybody is closing, canceling concerts whatsoever. And of course, personally, I was also very afraid, because we had to cancel dozens of concerts and we didn't knew immediate response to our concert listeners. So we had in the beginning to compensate a lot of money for the tickets purchased. So this was really huge financial loss and a very immediate loss. But thanks to great networking with European institutions, alliances and associations, one of them is very active, is European Festivals Association that will celebrate 70 years anniversary next year. This association is maybe a most motivating association in Europe, I would say, because I'm a member of this the Vilnius Festival 22 years, and it was established in 1952 in order to reconnect Europeans and European artists. It was founded by two visionaries, Swiss philosopher Denis de Rougemont and Ukrainian conductor Igor Markevich. And this was try to really physically reconnect the continent, while we did last year a digital reconnection of the continent. We were able to share with the colleagues so much database, knowledge, information, which helped us to sometimes even pressure our local authorities in order to very urgently make some financial schemes to compensate artists, to establish grants, to pay individual scholarships for which composers and many individual freelance artists could really continue their creative work. And therefore, in the performing arts in Baltic states, in Lithuania particularly, we were able to create parallel space, and the artists really took courage to reopen last summer, and we had a very fine summer season outdoors, because we were able to convince our government that culture is absolutely a vital and tool to really give society mental and physical health. Because it was the major social capital that the community created before the pandemic. And as we have a rather substantial investment of the public funding, we really had to return this investment to our audiences. And it was really great result, because both live and digitally, we had more listeners and more visitors than in the regular concert season. And this was European-wide. Those who took courage to make live festivals, they were very happy with the result and with the support of the local communities. And I think this force majeure situation really forced us to think globally, to take global knowledge, to share global data and perspectives, and to act locally. Because festivals mainly, they work with the local communities, and we see from now from the situation of this major touristic attractions, these huge festivals in Salzburg and Edinburgh, they have to rely now on their local audiences, local artists, and without creating very strong local communities, we wouldn't be able to convince that we are important institutions, we are important artistic societies, we are important education institutions, and of course we should motivate especially young audiences to get back and to access live arts when it will be possible. Of course, we have gained a lot of technological competencies, even virusological competencies, but we lost some time to working on our professional agenda. I hope that in the way of international cooperation and networking, we will be able to find solutions for our digital production, which is, I think, that after the year of the quarantine, the global quarantine, the attention to the digital content will naturally drop. The spring is coming, summer is coming. We should meet. We want really to interact lively. And then we will have to think about these new economic tools, how to really tax digital content and how to install all the possible forms of payment, would it be ticket or donation? Because of course the institutions that promote star artists, they are able to charge $20 for a Metropolitan Opera star concert. It is not so very easy to do with a local orchestra, which is playing usually every weekend, and then to ask to pay as for the normal ticket, it is not possible. And therefore, this economical circulation and the budgets we have to balance, it will be very, very big challenge. And from this perspective, I want to say as the general director of the institution, which I'm already working 24 years, we must all think about the balancing our budgets and balancing and having some investments in the future of our activities, to have some schemes of the programs, savings, to have very good partners who could become our sponsors or donors, because we cannot just stop. You know, it is very, very harmful to the performing arts when we just stop and say, now it's a year off, and in a year we will be back with some new formats, new content. This is not, it's not loyal to our audiences. So I think we will be able to really innovate and to have a lot of motivation for ourselves as the managers of big institutions which receive very large audiences every night. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. I wanted to touch on the topic that you're in charge of the orchestra as one of your many hats, and keeping an orchestra together for a year when they're not performing is not easy. I mean, we've seen examples in America where orchestras are just being told to close for the period. How did you manage the period with keeping the orchestral members with you and I don't want to say fulfilled, but engaged?
This is both advantage and disadvantage. We are not able in our region to pay really global fees, neither to the permanent orchestra members nor to the guest conductors or soloists. However, as I told you about balancing the budgets, we have survived several world crises, and as our economy, as of the little independent state, was always very fragile, we understood that without the local artistic community and these permanent orchestras, ballet and opera companies, we will not be able to implement our regular seasons. And therefore, it is most of the investment made from the public budget. And we earn what we earn, we invest into our artistic programming and advertising, education, international competitions. We had very, very fine international competitions. And the next one, I hope it will be live, not digital, is of Jascha Heifetz, who was born in Vilnius, and he performed his first recital in this hall behind me. So keeping the orchestra, most of all, it's a very difficult motivation, but what we managed to do, we are now able to test every week before they start to work on Monday. We are testing. The orchestra is in two parts. It's like A and B group. It's a chamber size of the orchestra, and then they work this 1 week. They mainly make recordings and or record for the digital concert hall. And we think that when we can restart, we will do it very, very quickly, because there is a knowledge how to work and rehearse in this pandemic situation. And with the big help of the European festivals, we are able also to think about the future exchange, live and digital exchange of the touring companies. And of course, this will be under the scheme of the European Perform Europe program, which will fund this special touring programs. So of course, we will find the way to reconnect.
Wonderful. I have a question, Ruta, that has come up in our Zoom room chat specifically for you. May I ask Ruta to repeat the name of the European Festivals Association co-founder who worked with conductor Igor Markovic, please?
I'll tell and write. Denis de Rougemont. Denis de...
Denis de Rougemont.
Yes.
Denis de Rougemont.
Yes, yes. Very, very, such a visions that last now for 7 decades. Yeah. And they are still very fresh.
Thank you very much. Karendra de Voop, Artistic Director of the UNITAR music competitions based in Pretoria, South Africa. Karendra is a former board member of the World Federation of International Music Competitions, and he is also the acting director of the Directorate Music at the University of South Africa, UNITAR in Pretoria. In addition to managing all of the national and international music competitions, he also manages the UNITAR concert series, UNITAR Pops and UNITAR Jazz Festival. Karendra has served as a jury member for several international music competitions and is regularly called upon by the music industry and professional organizations in South Africa to provide guidance and leadership. Karendra, I will also say, is an exceptional saxophonist, and I believe that needs to be mentioned normally. And he has been released several jazz recordings, and I've heard him myself. So I have to put that forward, that to credit you with the multiple hats that you wear. But Karendra, I invite you to talk about the impact that COVID has had on your competitions, your thoughts about how you can run international competitions in the future, and perhaps what some of your colleagues are doing to ensure that we provide as many opportunities as possible for young artists to still realize their dreams.
Thank you so much, Ben. Colleagues, it's an absolute honor and a pleasure to be here and to be invited to talk. I'm fortunate that I straddle two worlds. One, as a manager that manages our competitions, which are a pretty big chunk of what we do, but we also have our concert series and international collaborations with various embassies and artists from around the world. But I'm also a performer. This year has been extremely difficult for our country. From a performer's perspective, like all other countries, things have come to a standstill. For me personally, 2020 was going to be my most productive year with tours of US, Kazakhstan, Japan, Thailand, Netherlands, and it all stopped after one orchestra performance in Denver. And the chances of those concerts and tours coming back are rather slim at this point. But the bigger challenge for me was seeing all of the other artists in South Africa go through even more difficulties. As many of you know, South Africa is more of a developing country when it comes to the arts. We don't have a robust industry like North America and Europe. So I think the saying is, you know, when America sneezes, the whole world catches a cold. And that's so true for South Africa. When the pandemic affects the arts, you know, across the world, it literally destroys the arts in our country. And we've seen it with the shutting down of performance houses, We've seen it with orchestras having to close down. We've seen it with artists literally being evicted from their homes for not being able to pay rent. From a management perspective, I'm fortunate to be in a position where we can affect some change. The University of South Africa is a very large institution with over 400,000 students. It's one of the big big industry players in the country. We regularly hire pretty much most of the orchestras around the country. We engage with the media, with the industry, from the copyright societies to performing organizations to concert halls. Usually when an artist comes through to South Africa to perform for us, we try to connect them with all of the other performing houses and venues across the country. So we know firsthand exactly what the pulse of our country has been. But as I had mentioned, we're in a position to affect some change. Because as the university that bears the name of the country, one of our goals is to impact the arts, to impact societies that need help. So what we have done is we've tried to support the arts. Because we're in a position to host concerts and adapt, we've tried to provide as much employment as we can for the artists. A lot of it has been virtual. For example, we're in the final stages of wrapping up our first virtual festival, which we are shooting next week. It's an entire festival that's going to be done virtually for two reasons. One, we want to support the artists in our country. We do want to provide them with an opportunity to still perform. But also we want to start pushing the boundaries in terms of our ability technologically. In terms of our competitions, that has been an even bigger challenge because we are now faced with a national competition that's going to take place in July. And we've been informed by the scientists in our country that the third wave is looming. And we're going to have to, we have to figure this out. So we put into place mechanisms where we can be very flexible with our competitions, because we have these young artists who've been preparing literally for years and they want to participate. For the first time in our history, we've had record numbers of entries because artists are at home. Young musicians have the time to prepare to enter the competition. You know, they're not bogged down with other commitments. But we have to be very, very flexible should the pandemic still persist and we don't have vaccines and the new normal does not arrive for us. And all expectations is that it's going to be delayed in South Africa. So we have positioned ourselves as an institution to affect change in a couple of ways. One, to support the artists as best as we can, because we have the facilities. Unlike other venues across the world, we don't pay an arm and a leg to rent a venue. These venues belong to us. They belong to the university. So we can get venues literally, you know, practically for free. We have our staff that are available. So ultimately, our only costs are the artists. We have in-house graphic design, in-house marketing, publicity. So we have capitalized on all assets that we have that we can use to affect change, to support the artists, and our only cost would be the artists. Even though it is a pandemic, we took the decision to pay the artists their full fee, whether they play a full concert or they play a virtual concert or they play a hybrid concert. Because as an artist, the one thing I hate is to be ripped off as an artist. Someone telling me, can you reduce the fee? Can you make it cheaper? And my philosophy has always been, I don't want to be treated that way, and I'm not going to treat our artists that way. The artists are very, very appreciative. The second area that we try to affect change nationally is that we are in very close contact with the orchestras, with the copyright societies, with the festivals. And we've tried to affect change on a national level for all of the arts by working with all of the music industry trying to work with the government to have them realize that in our country, the music industry contributes, I think it's 1.7 billion Rand towards our economy, which is not a lot, but it's a significant amount. And given our history of having world-class performers emerge from our country, we cannot afford to now put a damper on that development. So we've been lobbying very, very hard with government. We've been working with the industry to support. Our colleagues mentioned orchestras that are really struggling. We've tried to support our orchestras by providing them with work, whether it's in a virtual format, in some format, again, paying them full fees to try and support them. But going forward, and I'll leave you with this, we've taken the bold decision to proceed in 3 areas. One is, as some of our colleagues have mentioned, a blended form of concerts. We found the virtual concerts have been working very, very well. It's expanded our reach. So going forward, we are definitely going to start incorporating more blended concerts. Whether the new normal takes us back to the old normal or not, it's something we've taken a conscious decision that we are going to engage. Nothing will stop us from having a world-class performer on stage with some kind of virtual performance that's already been pre-recorded of that artist in collaboration. For example, you could have a concert pianist come through and they perform a solo recital for us. But nothing stops us from having some kind of virtual performance between their performances, before or after, of that artist's performances with some world-class orchestra or a trio. So blended concerts is definitely high on our agenda. The second area we want to focus on is collaborations, purely because the virtual environment allows artists to collaborate virtually. Network connectivity is an issue in South Africa, as it is in most of Africa. So real-time performances and real-time concerts are more of a challenge. And we've decided, well, let's go the pre-recorded route. Let's have artists collaborate, local artists with international artists with international artists, and have that part of our concert series, have that part of what we do. The third and final area that we've decided we're going to focus on is flexibility. Flexibility in our programming. We've decided that we cannot program a full year, a full season like we did in the past. And, come at the beginning of the season, we have our artists set out for the year. We've decided that we are going to be very flexible with our programming. We've asked our artists to be very, very flexible for a couple of reasons. We understand that artists are going to run into problems. We have a couple of artists who are scheduled to perform for us in June from Italy. And we realize that Italy is currently a hotspot for the pandemic. They may not be able to leave, which becomes a problem for our concert series. We may be in a position where we cannot host the concert, or flights, incoming flights are a problem. So we're looking at flexibility, and we've asked artists to try to be flexible, assuring them that if they've been contracted to perform with us, they will perform. We will not cancel and tell them, well, too bad, you would have to forfeit, etc. And I think that's the beauty of being an artist. It's the way I would like to be treated, so it's the way we're going to treat all of our artists. As an institution, we are fully supported by university. We play a significant role in supporting the arts. We have a very large outreach project with over 1,500 plus kids in community projects, young musicians, youth orchestras. And so we ask some of our artists, okay, you cannot do a full concert because our virtual concerts, are 50% of the time. Would you consider a short 20-minute masterclass or a talk for some of our community engagement kids? A way to interact, have our kids ask some questions beforehand. These are just some of the ways that we are trying to leverage our ability to affect change within our country. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you, Karendra. Thank you for all the work you're doing, by the way, first and foremost. But thank you for fleshing this out, because you're talking about sustainability, and you're talking about development, and you're talking about young people and the future of the sector. I'm interested also that you're actively putting artists first in all of your thinking and behaving for the artists, with the artists, and adapting to meet the reality of what a performing artist's life will be like post-COVID. You mentioned that you're asking your artists to be flexible and to perhaps perform less and do some community engagement and community activity. Is that a skill that some of your artists are having to learn, or are you finding that your artists are very eager to do that community engagement activity? Or is it something that's growing? Is this an area that you see that perhaps artists will be doing more of this type of work post-COVID?
To tell you the truth, Ben, we found the artists are extremely enthusiastic to do this. And we have not specified to them, we want you to do a 30-minute masterclass. Absolutely not. We've told them it could be as simple as talking about your experiences in the music industry. What were some of the challenges that you've experienced as a young artist, having doors closed, when you were in your 20s, and then only to realize in your 30s, you've got all these concert houses, who actively want to engage you. So we try to leave it as open as possible, speak about absolutely anything. And our kids, as I had mentioned, we have a very young industry. It's still finding its feet given our history prior to 1994. So our kids come from very poor rural backgrounds. They have no idea what the world of a performing artist is like. They read something in a magazine that Wynton Marsalis, he's flying business class and he has a limousine pick him up and he's living in a 5-star suite. And we try to tell them, well, that's not reality. Let's talk to some artists and let's give you a dose of reality. Yes, it may be true for 1% of the artists, but there's a lot of artists who are willing to do whatever it takes to build their careers. So we try to be very, very flexible in terms of what the artists want to present. But we understand that some of them are not comfortable doing it. And that's not an art. We wouldn't force them. We wouldn't hold them to a contract to do that. We engage, we encourage them. But this follows on what we used to do prior to COVID. Whenever artists came through to South Africa, we would ask them if you wouldn't mind, having a chat to all of our development students, the young university students, just answer some questions. And these kids will have, it's amazing, they would have the wildest questions for these artists, things that we don't think about. We usually think about, it's the bigger things, my contract, my management, my agency, my record label. For these kids, it's bare bones, simple things like, how often do you change strings, on your instrument? It's basic fundamental questions. And what's it like? The challenges. How do you prepare to perform with an orchestra? So they're very, very simple questions that made us realize these kids have access to these world-class musicians, so they take full advantage of it. But hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. I'm opening the floor now to our panelists and inviting you back for responses based on the having heard from everybody now, and opening the floor to conversation. Lydia, are you finding now that bookings are taking different formats for your artists? I mean, obviously the repertoire is changing and program is changing, but perhaps a format's changing as well.
I think that's occurring naturally, and part of this creative response to the restrictions that the pandemic has brought upon the whole industry. Out of necessity comes invention. And so the artists themselves are creating content in a different way. I hope we can talk about that a little bit as well, because really,
please.
You know, what is it that we're talking about here? We're talking about talent and content, and what does that content look like now? And the diversity and inclusiveness of that content and the way that we're addressing the blended offering, I think, is a really crucial thing. I'm going to quote an example of something I've seen recently. We, Paris and Parrot, actually launched our own digital platform in December, part of our, you know, our own answer to what it is that creative partners to artists need to be providing. It's called Virtual Circle. And this weekend, I saw a program which was the brainchild of Patricia Kopachinskaya with the Kamerata Bern, and it was called Death and the Maiden. And Pat and the Kamerata Bern had gone into the Reitschule in Bern and created this pretty mind-blowing program, which was a combination of very theatrical, filmic movement, acting, playing. They interspersed the movements of the Death and the Maiden Quartet with other musics, very old and very new. And so it was described as a concert movie. And it ended up being something that was made specifically for that digital moment. There was no compromise on quality. It was shaking up format. It was disruptive to repertoire, but at the same time, different light was thrown on the different pieces of music by the juxtaposition. And, you know, this is one example of programming that is now, I think, going to proliferate. And also alongside that, I think it's very important to recognize where artists, and particularly, but not only young artists, see it as their responsibility to bring to light underrepresented composers, neglected compositions, work from different voices, because if you don't bring different voices onto the concert platform, you will not bring different voices and different stories and different people into that audience. And if we don't do that, we won't sustain our industry.
I completely agree. Hannah, I think you might want to join in here.
Okay. When I mentioned at the beginning this Lady Ami encounter is the similar team presented the American premiere of Toshio Hisokawa's latest opera, and a week later we were closed. The encounters on stage and in different spaces, and we have to start looking for kind of open our minds to what is possible, what is not intimidating. I think one of the beautiful things about being online is you can sit on your couch and put your feet up and nobody judges you. And even if you drink your coffee, you're still fine. You're not disturbing your neighbor. And it's a great exposure. I think that during this year, I have seen a new way of creating theatrical plays through Zoom by a lovely writer. Actually, it's a wonderful story. Some of you might still know the name Israela Margalit, the wonderful, wonderful pianist who has stopped performing several years ago, but has been writing all these years. She reworked a few of her short stories and created fabulous multi-windows play, really engaging. The name is Crossroads. It's not publicity for the play, but I was so impressed by the creativity. And, you know, that just shows us that it's not limited to 20 years old, which is also helpful. And actually is huge inspiration for the 20 years old we can grow, we can change, we can be creative with what we have. And I think this is, we have heard that before, right? That necessity and needs. And I think what is happening this year is exactly that. We are rethinking the spaces in which classical music can take place, and the combinations of music, literature, visual arts, different genres. I believe there is a, bring closer jazz and classical music in a new way, not absorbing jazz in a work or that is kind of disappearing, but a dialogue. I think dialogues are the secret, I think, to our future. Real dialogues. Karendra mentioned these conversations with young musicians. We have, before our literary readings, very often encounters with authors, and you can have a Nobel Prize winner speaking about his latest work or her latest work, and as 11th grader says, and how do you overcome your writer's block? And what is the way you work? And it's the same with music. How do you overcome the block of not wanting to practice if you have no one to play for? How do you keep your rigor? And how do you collaborate with friends if you cannot have them in your house? And where are we going to go? Maybe our huge concert venues are just for some of the things that we present. Maybe we can rethink Café Zimmermann, the coffee shop where Bach presented all his secular works, his private concert hall. We can learn from the past, from the inventiveness. We have to. And see what we can enable. I mean, Patricia Kopachinskaya has been super creative, I think, since the day she was born. But she is, the lack of fear. You can create a new mosaic from existing works. You can create new combinations that suddenly give you new insights. All of that is now open. And this is a tremendous opportunity for us. And I think we need to look outside, people do hip hop together with classical performance, and there is something new in it. You get new insight, new understanding. I think this is this opening one's mind, learning about ourselves. Get out of our comfort zones. We cannot, yes, there will always be the problem of money, and we have to take good care of artists, because if they can't, to be starving artists is a beautiful romantic concept, but they still have to eat. Not even beautiful, they die when they don't have to eat. And be respectful of it.
I think you're absolutely right, Hannah. I think with this period of reflection, we're craving stories, we're craving authentic human experiences, and we're looking for programs that have something to say. We're looking to go and visit artists that have something particular to say. We're not just wanting another rendition of Beethoven Ninth. We're looking for something else. We're looking for a deeper connection.
Give me a new insight, not just another rendition. Give me an insight.
Yeah.
If it's Beethoven Ninth, we are still quoting Lenny Bernstein talking about the ode to freedom rather than it's Freiheit, and it's really important to remember.
It's something we've touched on with the work we were doing in the with ballet dancers and their situation last year, which is very similar to our orchestral musicians. How do you keep a company?
Because you can't lift a dancer if socially distanced, sorry.
But yes, physically, how do you maintain your physical shape and so forth? And we touched on the fact that COVID allowed dancers, and of course it has musicians as well, to perform in spaces they never would have performed in kitchens, in, you know, on tables, etc. And there's something we can take for the performing arts about widening venue possibilities. Of course,
Also, all of that, and there were concerts in jazz spaces, coffee shops. It started, at least in New York, before COVID. But it is like, let's sit back and think, we still want to keep acoustics intact. We want to, the art form should not be degraded. We should lift our brain and be active and see how we integrate the new things and how the technology we have can grow and help us. I think that's crucial. And, you know, if kids were underserved, how can we serve them? And does technology help us? These schools probably don't have yet that technology. Maybe that's the place of you want the billionaires, give it to the schools. These kids, it will come back to you much more than you think. This is like a crucial thing to think about.
Lydia, may I ask, your artists are performing in different platforms and a blend of digital and live concert experiences. Have you, as one of the leading artist management organizations, have you delivered extra training or delivered extra skill development for artists for the digital space? Have you had to?
That's a very good question. They've been doing a lot of learning by experience.
Ahead of us, yeah. They're all ahead of us. They come with better ideas than we can have.
I wouldn't have put myself into the expert seat on how to get somebody to make their living room concert sound better than it did yesterday. But actually collaboration, okay, it's back to partnership, isn't it? And communication and collaboration. If an artist is working with a new partner, which is maybe an independent production company or a radio station, and everybody is figuring out what to do with microphones, and then there is also the business of how to speak and how to introduce and how to do it naturally. And also, you know, you learn by observing others and seeing what works well and what doesn't work so well. And then you look across different disciplines, look at the influencers, look at the kids who are doing makeup tutorials or whatever. How do they light their faces? How do they have the camera in relation to them to give them a good angle? So, and some of it has been trial and error, honestly. But I also wanted to say that in the midst of all this eruption of creativity and doing things differently, I believe, I keep saying, and more this last year, it's not a question of either or, it's and. And there is still room for a transcendental Mahler 5 and a Beethoven 9 when there is that insight. And we mustn't think that with all of these different directions, it means that what we hold so dear from the great literature is somehow undervalued, but it does require something fresh, and it does require integrity and effort and a reason for that performance and a reason for that recording. I think several of us have talked about that, value. What artists are thinking about now is that the value they're bringing. They should, many are already asking themselves, and they should be asking themselves, why is anybody paying me to do this for a living? What am I doing to deserve that high-priced concert ticket or that digital ticket? And I heard a young artist say very recently to me, completely unprompted, being an artist is not just about performing on a concert stage. And the more artists who get that and who lead their lives and pursue careers which reflect that, the richer we will all be for it.
Yeah, I could not, sorry, Ben, I could not agree with you more, Lydia. Many years ago, when I was living in the US, we did a study of 30 artists across the US, in New York City, Los Angeles, and Las Vegas, as they were the big performance areas. And I went through a whole bunch of questions, asked them, is your career now as a musician exactly what you had envisioned when you were a student 10, 15 years ago? And if not, what would you change? And without fail, every single one of them, very high level artists who were playing, with Michael Bublé and the big houses in New York and Los Angeles, said, I was terrified the day I saw my first contract, because I did not know whether to sign it or not to sign it. Should I go seek out an entertainment lawyer? Because nobody had ever explained this to me. The second thing that everyone had explained was, I focused only on my instrument. I neglected everything else about marketing myself, getting my promo out. How do I write to a manager? How do I write to a festival? I had no clue. I wish I had studied that stuff when I was back at university. So you hit the nail right on the head, when you say they need to break out of just the performance side. In this day and age, you're a performer, you're a manager, you're a promoter all by yourself. And the quicker you grasp that, the better it is going to be for you, because you will adapt to the world outside.
I think increasingly conservatoires are introducing this into the curriculum, and it's taken a long time, but it's definitely coming through. And I think also this relates to something else I just wanted to flag up and see what others have found, although it was talked about a little bit by Andrea herself, giving young musicians agency in terms of what actually happens, what the change that they drive. I had a fantastic conversation just recently with Sarah Alexander, who runs the National Youth Orchestra of Great Britain. And when she came into that position, she seriously disrupted the model and had a pretty tough time doing it. But she has given agency to the teenage musicians in that orchestra, and they are the ones who have said, we are never going to perform a program again without there being at least one underrepresented composer on the program, a female composer, a composer of color. We are going to spend our time, and they have done during the past 12 months, taking music to other young people all over the UK, and they've done it to tens of thousands of youngsters through digital programs which they have devised, taking music to youngsters who otherwise wouldn't even trip over orchestral music in their young lives. And the inspiration to be gained from, as I say, giving agency to young people, to people who may have been overlooked before because other people thought they knew better. That's another one of the great outcomes I think we can take and sustain after this period.
Thank you so much, Lydia. Ruta, I wish to give the floor to Ruta. She politely put her hand up earlier, and I'd like to.
I just wanted very much to thank to the colleagues Lydia, Hannah, and Karendra, because they emphasized one very important thing, which is we are responsible for the excellence in performance and management, especially music performance and music management, because we are responsible for those thousands of music performers and listeners who use music as a universal language. And while other professions during the pandemic, they are very much keen of improving their competencies. They are progressing, they are developing, they are using all the technologies and new digital tools. We should understand that we are responsible for probably the main tool to use intangible cultural heritage, which is orchestras, choirs, musicians. This community, music community, can really reach out to every local community, to every local individual, and to help a lot, because it is really, it needs no translation. I know recently the South African, Lithuanian Embassy in South Africa asked me to present a series of digital concerts about Lithuanian Jewish composers and their stories. And one story is very particular. There was last year Leopold Godowski anniversary, and I asked famous Lithuanian pianist to learn his sonata, a very big opus. And she said, sorry, I have no time. It needs at least 3 months to rehearse. And then we got pandemic. She could rehearse. She could rehearse. She played digitally throughout the world. She recorded CD, which won Diapason d'Or in France. And so this was a big result of pandemic impact. Thank you.
Thank you. The digital reach, I always felt when I was presenting a competition in Australia, it was achieving a certain format and a certain enjoyment for a certain group of people. But taking what we do and taking the performing arts out of the sort of places we thought it had to be is such a great opportunity we now have. And I really feel that COVID has given us not only the necessity, but it's given us some time for artists to become familiar with this new demand. I used to say to the competitors, you must do media, etc. You must be able to consider doing digital streaming. And back then it was very much, no, if I don't really have to, I'll postpone that for a while. Now there's just such a structural shift that it's digital presentation is necessary. And so I think we have this blended future that offers it just offers exponential level of reach, provided we do it properly, respectfully, and that we discuss realities such as fair remuneration for this global output of performing arts practice. Tomorrow, we'll be joined by 6 other panelists, some of whom have experience or deep experience with copyright and IP and proper remuneration for the performance and recording of works, which is a whole other aspect to ensuring a sustainable development for this sector. I wish to thank my panelists today sincerely for your time, your wisdom, your commitment, your reminder of the value of art and artistry and the value of the performing arts, not only last year, but as we go forward. The value that artists play in our society must be recognized at the highest level for helping us get through the human tragedy that last year brought. I'd like to thank our team working behind the scenes, and I'd like to thank Marco Suazo for helping us deliver this conference today. We're going to take a short shift and watch a short clip of a film that was made in response to a conference we held last year for Resiliart, which is a division of UNESCO, a program of UNESCO to talk about the reality of the performing arts sector. And I'm proud that it inspired a short work. And I would like to finish today's session. Will come back to let Ambassador Suazo close the session today. But for now, enjoy this short clip. Thank you. With that, I'd like to thank all our panelists today, Hannah Ari-Geifman, Lydia Connolly, Karendra Devrup, Andrea Kellen, and Ruta Pusheviciani. Thank you for joining us today. You are welcome to join us tomorrow. And now I pass the floor to Ambassador Swazik. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, for sharing with us and for illustrating us the impact of COVID, the hope that we have for a better future, the challenges that you have been facing as educators, as performers. But the most important thing that I take from today's conversation is the spirit and the resilience and the hope that we will do better. That's why the United Nations was created 75 years ago, trying to make this a better place for everybody. So your every single effort is just aimed to that universal goal. And so that's why the Global Foundation and UNITAR are joint efforts precisely to have this conversation, to amplify the message and to reach out most of the people in the world of the importance of performing arts, music, and to the impact that these arts have in every one of us. So thank you very much. I'll see you tomorrow. I learned a great deal today. And I visit some opera houses from the distance. I never saw them before, so now it's beautiful. So I'll see you tomorrow. Thank you once again. Bye from New York now.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Everyone.
Thank you.
Tomorrow.
See you
Thank
tomorrow.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.